honor the, is that on now? Yes. The deep feeling and the passion and the love tumbling down in the room right now. Yeah. I said yes to Norma to do this today for 3 reasons. One of them is that I wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of what's coming with that Work That Reconnects workshop, experientially, so it's not just words, but it's something that already starts to live in your body, because I think it's a tremendous gift. The second reason is I am totally, wholly, 100% committed to Love Tumbling Down. And I also know, just as Norma has alluded to with the shadow work, that sometimes there are things in the way. And I want to talk a little bit today about ways to get rid of what's in the way so that full beauty and power can come through. All of us, individually, and us as a community of people. And the last thing is that I'm going to tell you a story. I'm really happy to describe some things that happened on a recent trip to Turkey. This is not a travelogue. It is a story of how I used some of Joanna Macy's work in that setting over there. And I think it will give you somewhat of a feel for how it might be relevant over here too. Though Turkey is in quite a state of challenge and demise, sitting between East and West, a lot of it characterized by the dynamics in the Middle East, I believe that those same dynamics could come down here anytime, and they could come down quickly, and that our need to find this stance and presence relative to intensified challenges that are coming up around us is really important. So this day, my part of this is dedicated to helping us during this time even find a little bit of that stance. Just to start that, people always ask, the work that reconnects, well, what are we connecting to what? And there's just a whole lot of reconnection that needs to happen that's already been given words in the song, and that Norma has spoken and Anya has had in the poem. And so I just thought we could do a gesture together that would embody that connection before I start to talk. So I'm going to step out here and hopefully speak loud enough so that you can hear me, and ask you if you can do this sitting down, or if you would like to stand up. About 20 years ago now, I somehow happened onto, or got called into, working with women. What I'm going to say doesn't just apply to women, it applies to all of us. But that's how I got called into this. And the work I ended up doing, that began here in Ashland and has spread quite far and wide internationally, is to help women find their stance, their calling, their voice, their confidence, and their contribution in the world, especially in times of deep transition. Either transition that's going on externally to us, or transition internally to us. That's what my book's about, a lad. And about 6 years ago, I was doing a workshop in California, and a week before that happened, a woman called me from Turkey and said, I want to come. If I can get there, can I come for free? And I said, yeah, come on, let's go. Her name was Borju, and I'm going to talk about Borju during this time. So Borju showed up She was very quiet, listened, went all the way through that workshop, and at the end she stood up and she said, if I get the people together, will you come to Turkey and do this there? So we did. And 4 months later, she had it all together, and a colleague and I went, and this was the first time that we did this work in a Muslim community. And it had different flavors and similar flavors to it. So 6 years later after that, they have had many of such workshops for people in Turkey. There are a lot of graduates from these coming into your own programs. And they wanted to do a gathering for alumni, and they invited me and another colleague to come over and offer a sequel to the first program. So we went, it was just several weeks ago, we went to a town called Cappadocia. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that, but Cappadocia is way on the eastern part of Turkey. It's 125 miles from Syria. It's very much the Middle East, and very beautiful. Looks kind of like our Southwest with these incredible rock formations and colors, and beautiful deep canyons that are filled with farms, and very traditional farming over there. They don't use any pesticides or anything, they just do it. Birds, and it was the first time in my life I really heard nightingales just singing in those canyons. There was a beauty there in the people and in the land that really stayed with me. It was a perfect setting to have this gathering. It's very porous land there because it's volcanic. So our meeting place was carved into a mountain and in a cave, actually. So we were in the earth doing our work and our meeting there together. So we did many things together, but I want to concentrate on one piece that we did that is inspired by Joanna Macy's work. What I've learned over many decades now, maybe 2 decades of working with people, is that you can't grow and evolve and change in a natural kind of organic way a life that I'm referring to your own, that you have not really looked at, that you haven't accepted the way it is with all its challenges, a life that you haven't blessed, so that it is free then to actually be carried on a new wave of change that will come when you surround it with this kind of care and attention and interior work too. So we, in that situation, the first thing that was most apparent to me when I got there was, can you imagine if you were in Ashland and there were 7,000 refugees here? It would be a really different town. You think we got a homeless problem now? This was 1/3 of all the people in this small town were refugees, and they're from North Africa and from Afghanistan and of course from Syria. And coming back from Europe because they're being returned to Turkey according to some lousy deal that their president made with the EU. So that was one of the first impressions. But what I asked them to do, it was in a ritual, safe way, was to describe what they see and what they feel in the world that they're living in. And what I learned with it was that it was so horrific and so scary for them to do this that they never talked about this. It was like unspoken because it was unspeakable. Their terror and fear for what was coming in their world was so big. So they were like, oh God, what's she going to ask us to do? By that time, they trusted me. I've known a lot of those people for years. But I divided them up. I put a big sheet of paper out on the floor for them to populate with what they saw going on in their country and in their lives. Broke them up into groups of 3s. They came up with the key things that they were aware of, and they came and they placed them on the floor on this big sheet of paper. So we ended up with this mandala. So I'm just going to read to you some of the things that are on that mandala. I wrote them down here. Definitely the refugee situation, which is overwhelming to them. How do you feed them? What do you do? I mean, it's... and with the refugees comes the terrorists. You can't sort it out. Turkey has the highest rate of terrorism in the world right now going on there. So both the Kurdish terrorists and the ISIS situations are making it very unsafe that children are afraid to walk to school on their own. It permeates the country. The terrorism is taking place very strategically in tourist areas, which is a very big part of their economy in a beautiful historic country. And tourism has plummeted. Even in this country, they're telling us not to travel to Turkey, and so their economy is crashing. There's, in the Muslim world, why this has to happen, I don't know, but what it does happen that when the pressure comes on, a lot of people take it out on the women. And so the great strides that have been made for women in the past 20 years are in jeopardy at this point. Their president is telling women, gave a speech last week, that women are only half women if they work or if they don't have children, and there is pressure and possible punishment that's on the horizon. So these women who have been learning about their own stature and contribution are feeling a huge backlash coming back on them. I just want to say a word about their president, who is amassing power into the presidency, pulling it out of other forms of the government. He's holding great emotional rallies where people are called into supporting him. He's very dramatic and convincing. He is suppressing press so that the real story of what's going on isn't being told. And he is building his popularity on hatred of other races. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar at all, but it should. These elements are not so very far away from things going on over here. So, that they were courageous to even put this out and look at this together. We had it on the floor. And then I said to them, okay, I want to give you the opportunity to speak to this. And I gave them 5 props, and I'm going to go over here and just hold these props because I brought them. If you can't hear me, put your hand up. So I gave them a stick, and the stick relates to anger. I gave them a great pile of dead leaves, and this is grief. I gave them an empty bowl for powerlessness and futility. What can one person do? I gave them a really big, heavy rock for the fear that sits in the pit of your stomach when you live in those conditions. And I gave them a really beautiful piece of fabric for any other feeling that came up that they wanted to express. And these were laid out in front of this mandala. And I said, if you'd like to come up and express how you feel about this, you're welcome. And they were, oh shit, you know. And The first woman that came up was Borju, who had hosted this whole thing. And she came up and she picked up that stick and she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "I am so angry with you for asking us to do this." Oh, here we go. We are not in our comfort zone. We don't do this. And then she went on. She went through it. And at that point I was like, praying to Allah, man, I just lost words. Because at that point, you open up and trust whatever is going to come through people. Whoever, maybe nobody would stand up. Maybe, I don't know what was going to happen, but this is just faith in a process of doing what you have to do to open a heart, to make people present so that they can think clearly, so they can be present with what's going on. What's going on is because they can't feel, because it's too risky, they go numb. And people can't see the risks, can't see what's in jeopardy, can't look honestly at what's happening because the feelings are numbed down. Thank you, Joanna Macy. She has worked with how to open this up. That is the essence of her work, and the work that reconnects. So one at a time, they came up. Every woman spoke. Some of them spoke more than once. They would pick up one thing and say what came to them and then pick up another as the next feeling rolled in. And there was, I wrote down a couple of the things. There was so much rage at their government, and they needed to move that energy that had just been sitting in them. There was huge amounts of grief. It's the loss of a country that they love, of traditions, of a way of living that has been graceful and beautiful there, and it is going down the tubes quite quickly. Fear, they held onto that rock, and it was a story about children. Fear for their grandchildren, fear for their children, and for physical safety, right down to those levels, and fear that they have to leave the country. That this is one of the things you have to look at. Do you stay in a country when things are in that? Do you stay or fight? And what does fighting mean? So those are questions that they were living with in this great fear and a huge sense of powerlessness. Partly because if you do speak up over there, the repercussions are huge. You get on a list, and it's hard for you or your children. So they did it, and I thought it would never end. We did this for 2 hours. And I just trusted, okay, we're going to get to the other side of this, because the point of doing this is to get to the other side of it. And they were exhausted. I was just like holding, trusting. And with huge silence on the other end. Everything had been spoken that needed to be. This great grace fell down in that room on those people. And we quietly got up and we went for a very long walk on that land in silence. Unplanned, no rules about silence, that's just the way it was. But what happened in them over that walk was a lightness that started coming into them, like a feeling of just almost like wanting to run and dance on those walkways. There was something that lifted, that has been sitting like this weight blocking clear thought, open heart, energy, creativity, courage. They just lived under the weight of this. But once they went through it, there was space. There was vitality. There was love. There was the willingness willingness to do what each one needed to do. They started feeling what was theirs. When they left, that some of them were saying, well, what are we supposed to do now? We've really come to a new stance in ourselves, but what's the action? And we didn't define the action. One of Bourgeois, again, who hosted this thing, she was the one who said, well, what do we do? What do we do? What's our contribution now? And I said, you wait. It'll come to you. In the space of an opened, softened heart, the knowledge of what to do rises. And it rises differently in every person. And she ended up, she wrote me a note last week, and she said, what I was called to do, she said, I haven't written poetry since I was 16 years old in my in my English class in high school. And she said, I was called to write poetry. She does all this fancy other stuff. She says, all I want to do is write poetry. So she took her poetry, she wrote it, it was pouring through her. She said, I'm not going to edit it. She threw it onto Facebook immediately, just the way it was. And the response, the shares, thousands of people within weeks coming back to her because of where this was coming from in her. The work that she had done, the energy rolled through there. And her leadership in that country has been, is establishing itself in her own unique way. So it's not necessarily what you think it's going to be, is just what I want to say. That what moves in us could be through music. Every person's going to find a different way, and as we get together, our overlaps will tell us what our collective gestures are together. So I wanted to just end my part here by just bringing it back to this community for just a little ritual here, where one of the things that I love about Joanna's work is that it's based on the power of the work. The motivating force comes from what you cherish about life and what's worth protecting for you. So I'd like to give you just no more than a minute. This is going to be really simple. A chance to turn to someone next to you and basically fill in a blank. You're only going to say one thing. We're not going to get on a soapbox here. Just so it focuses in your own awareness. What is one thing that I cherish about life that I would like to protect? So just give you a moment here to turn to one another.
Thanks, Norm.
Love tumbling down, love tumbling down, love tumbling down on me.
Now can we forgive what we've learned? Can we move on from the past? Have the walls all been fought? Can this one be the last? What do we need to change for the world to believe that no matter our gender, skin color, or creed, we were made to give and receive love, love, love? And I'm all fed up for crying out loud, and now I'm armed and dangerous. So I sent a postcard to myself as a kid, as an 8-year-old boy, learning how to exist with the guilt of his living while others go cold, and how to feel blessed with his death when he's old. And I leave it up to him to choose a new way, or let a new way choose him. And now I'm armed and dangerous. You're armed and dangerous. Clear-cut forests for corner asphalt roads to ski slopes. We carry fire and plastic which litters our coast. My friend Myron has taught me the power I have to make fire with sticks from cedar or aspen. There's a balance with nature we've lost. I don't get angry about much, but this sure pisses me off. And now I'm armed and dangerous. You're armed and dangerous. We're armed and dangerous, 'cause we see the love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. And now our anger is rising. I hope you can understand. The revolution is one vote, voice, and one grain of sand. So says Cecil, and Oaks, Guthrie, Dillis, and Morbid, Byers, and King. When even just one is suffering, we all feel the sting. Calling mothers and fathers and children to be the change in the world that we want to see. And now I'm armed and dangerous. You're armed and dangerous. We're armed and dangerous, 'cause we see the love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. Now this machine that I'm playing, this here box of wood, it's made of spruce and steel, cedar, ebony, and rose wood, and seashells and cow bones that we kill for our meat. This one is handmade in PA in a factory. One song written is a protest, one I'd say, for faith in oneself, welling pride in your chest, choosing love for generations that haven't come yet. Clean water, clean food, clean medicine, clean air, clean money, clean lovers and friends. Our leaders come and they go, doesn't really matter to me. But if you're voting, please vote on what you believe. And now I'm armed and dangerous. You're armed and dangerous. We're armed and dangerous, 'cause we see the love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down.
We see the love tumbling down.
The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down. The love tumbling down.
Love tumbling down. Love tumbling down. Love tumbling down.
Yeah, it's a big energy flow.